Ancient Archimedes and his menacing machinery. Archimedes is not only very famous, he's also very dead. He lived over 2000 years ago. In those days, no one had got around to inventing much yet. The problem with Archimedes being so incredibly ancient is that, though there are loads of stories about him, it's hard to know which are true. Apart from a few of his own writings, we often have to rely on copies of books written by people who lived long after Archimedes. Even Cicero, a Roman historian who did some proper research into Archimedes, lived over 3 centuries later. This means that some of the things that Archimedes is famous for probably never happened. But he still did a lot of amazing things like being one of the greatest mathematicians ever, launching a ship all by himself, not inventing the Archimedes Screw, and creating the Archimedes principle. Maths was by far Archimedes' favorite thing to do. All his surviving books are about it, and he much preferred it to inventing. He probably wouldn't be famous as an inventor had the Romans not tried to massacre everyone in his city. Anyway, Archimedes was born in 287 BC in Syracuse, a seaside town in Sicily. His dad was an astronomer, and his family might have been related to the king Heron II. When he was a young man, Archimedes went off to Alexandria in Egypt to study. After finishing studies and living back in Syracuse, Archimedes was spending so much time doing maths that he often forgot to bathe or even eat. Very often, he'd write sums on himself using grime and ashes from the fire. This passion eventually led to him discovering the geometrical relationship between a sphere and a cylinder, which was rather clever and very handy. He also worked out a way to estimate the value of pi, as well as devising the very first version of what is now called integration. Macho Machinery. Unlike the general perception, Archimedes actually did invent. No, the Archimedes Screw was not one of them. One of these inventions amazed everyone. It was a way of enormously increasing a person's strength, or so it seemed at least. To convince people, Archimedes organized a public demonstration. A thick rope was attached to a huge, fully laden ship that was all ready to be launched, and Archimedes connected the other end to his invention on the far side of the harbor. When his audience was in place, he began to pull on a second rope connected to the other side of his machine, and the rope connected to the ship first tautened and then very slowly dragged the ship into the sea. Everyone was amazed. How could he have made himself so much stronger? Actually, it hadn't. The invention was just an arrangement of pulleys, each of which worked like the image shown below. Between the upper and lower pictures, Archimedes has pulled out 1 meter of rope, but this only results in the ship moving half a meter. So as you can see, this is bound to happen. It's the only way Archimedes' rope could stay the same length, which is 5 meters. So the end of his rope moves twice as far as the ship's rope does, but the ship's rope pulls on the ship twice as hard as Archimedes pulls on his rope. By linking together lots of these pulleys, Archimedes could increase the effect many times, so he really could use his invention to move weights far heavier than he could have done otherwise. Machines like this were incredibly useful, especially for loading ships and moving building materials. The Archie Screw. In case you didn't know what an Archimedes screw is, here's a video. Contrary to popular belief, Archimedes actually did not invent the Archimedes screw. He only introduced it to Syracuse. The Archimedean screw is a water pump that looked like this. It works just like a corkscrew. As you rotate into a cork, bits of cork move up the length of the screw. The only difference is that the Archimedean screw has a cylinder around it to stop the water falling out the sides. It's no surprise that Archimedes liked the screw, since screws and cylinders were two of his favorite shapes, and it must have seemed as magical as his pulley machine to people who didn't know about it, which was more or less everyone. It came in very useful when one of King Hieron's boat had been left out in the rain and had filled with water. Hieron asked Archimedes to give him a hand to empty it, and Archimedes used an Archimedean screw to do the job. The device probably became known by Archimedes' name because he went on and on about them so much. They're still used today, pumping all sorts of things, from blood to rainwater. King Hieron also asked Archimedes to be his detective. He'd had a shiny new crown made for him by a goldsmith, and he'd given the goldsmith a big lump of gold to make it with. The crown weighed the same as the lump, but for some reason, don't ask why, Hieron was suspicious. Hieron wondered whether the crown was really made of pure gold. Maybe the goldsmith had substituted some of the gold for silver and kept the rest for himself. Could Archimedes help? Of course he could! After a bit of thinking and a quick bath, he had it. We all know what the Greek did after that. Archimedes had come up with a brilliant way of finding out whether the gold crown really was made of gold. He did it by realizing that, because gold is heavier than silver, a block of gold with the same volume as the crown must weigh the same as the crown, unless the crown was made from a mixture of gold and silver. And he came up with a marvelously clever way of measuring the volume of the crown when he realized that the volume of water displaced by a submerged object is the same as the volume of a submerged object. Clever, eh? Wouldn't you want to rush about naked after discovering that? And one experiment late. Just after the Romans sneaked in and attacked Syracuse, Archimedes was found by a Roman soldier. Although his orders were to not kill Archimedes, he did, since Archimedes wouldn't budge until his calculations were done, and the Roman soldier had no time for that sort of thing.